Back with me, CNN military analyst and retired Colonel Cedric Leighton. Also joining us is Jamil Jaffer. He's the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at the George Mason University Scalia Law School. He also served as counsel for the George W. Bush White House. Jamil, one of the big question marks over all of this is whether President Trump was part of a deception campaign, publicly saying he did not want Israel to strike, but privately signing off on it so that the Iranians would be lulled into a false sense of security, or whether, no, that was a sincere position, but right now Israel is giving him the opportunity to claim, oh, yes, I knew all along and I was completely with it.
Yeah, look, Jake, I think it's the latter. The reality is that if President Trump was fully supportive of this operation from the jump, he wouldn't have been talking about negotiating all this time. He would have been talking about negotiating just last night. The idea that this is all a setup to allow the Iranian commanders to be still in place is ridiculous. And you know how you know? After the strikes happened, why didn't the president come out with a statement right away? Why did Secretary Rubio have that limited statement saying, well, we were not involved, but we knew it was going to happen? Right?
He also did that statement. Also was notable for not saying we stand with Israel. Secretary Rubio, who first of all is a stalwart supporter of Israel, and second of all, lots of other people, lots of other politicians were saying we stand with Israel. That Rubio statement did not say that. And
you know that the White House was watching that statement very carefully. They were managing that statement, and they were managing what the president was saying. Now, ultimately, the president did come out strong, but it took him, 12, 16, 18 hours to do that. That suggests there was an internal debate going on about how to handle this. And now, this idea that I knew about it the whole way, I was just doing it for top cover, I don't buy the story.
And there is a domestic political part of this, too, Cedric, which is that there are a lot of people in the MAGA movement who think that this is Israel dragging the United States into a global conflict, and that this is not what people who voted for Donald Trump voted for. Notably, Tucker Carlson, the commentator who spoke at the Republican convention, in his newsletter this morning was very critical of this war and of the United States playing whatever role it did.
Yeah, it's a really interesting juxtaposition of things here that we're dealing with, Jake, because, quite frankly, it's in the U.S. national interest to defend Israel. And so when you have a situation where Israel goes preemptively and does conducts an attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities and other aspects of the Iranian command and control structure, you really have, in some ways, something that the U.S. administration may not have supported at the beginning, but they can take advantage of it now. And that's one of the key things that I think is very interesting about this. The other thing is, since it gives us this strategic opening here from a diplomatic and military perspective, you can also look at some of the movements of the military personnel involved in this. For example, the CENTCOM commander, General Kurilla, was supposed to testify in front of Congress. He was pulled from that testimony in order to deal with an issue, and that issue clearly was this.
We know now what that issue was. You used an interesting word there, preemptively. There is a debate about whether Israel is preemptive, which would imply that that Iran was about to strike with nuclear weapons or with whatever, and Israel was just heading them off at the pass. Some say this is not a preemptive strike. This is a preventive or preventative strike. What's your take?
Look, in my view, this is preemption. When you have a nation state that has called for the destruction of Israel and the destruction of America for decades, and they're trying to build and try to weaponize a nuclear weapons program, we knew they've had for a long time this ability to increase the enrichment of uranium. Now they're talking about weaponization. Prime Minister Netanyahu last night on TV said, we've seen evidence of weaponization. So he's saying things have gone further. At that point in the system, right, that is preemption. If you think a regime committed to your destruction, talks about it repeatedly, is going to get a nuclear weapon, going after that program before they get to that point, totally preemption, not just prevention.
Netanyahu said that he thought that they were maybe a year or even less, maybe a few months away from being able to put a nuclear weapon on a missile.
Right. I mean, look, that's a real problem. There are three elements you need to have when you have a nuclear weapons program: the delivery capability, the ballistic missiles, right? And then the weaponization, the ability to make an explosive device. That's what he's worried about, is the latter part.
All right, Jamil and Colonel Leighton, thank you so much.